that number 40 is significant and relevant in purifying the impurity. So to the mabul for 40 days came to purify the earth. So it was a giant mikveh. That was the purpose of the mabul. Like it says, where do we see in Torah that there's a concept of water purifying? Hashem says in Yechezkel, I'm going to throw upon you purify waters of purification and purify you. That's what the mabul is called the waters of Noiach. Again, even though he seemingly had nothing to do with the flood, on the contrary, he was the one who tried to prevent it. The flood, what did the flood do? The flood brought a spirit of rest and satisfaction to an impure world. It purified it. It made the world a restful place from the turbulence of impurity. That's why it's called Noiach. So now back to the point over here, right? So we see that what? We see that the rushing waters purify the world. So the pasuk in Shir Hashim we began with says that the water will not extinguish the love. So we're going to explain that there's a simultaneous process in these turbulent waters, if you will. They purify the person. Well, first of all, they challenge the love of the person to Hashem and make it an obstacle to overcome. They also bring out a deeper love in the person, and they purify the person. Now we'll see that this concept of the Shibud HaParnasa, which means the servitude of making a living, which means basically the fact that if you live in this world, you don't live for free, right? Most people got to work for a living. Okay, the fact that effort that it takes to provide for himself, Hashem made the world in a way where, in order to sustain himself, a person has to work. You can't just sit at your table and money falls on your table. Most people don't live that way. You got to go out, you got to plant and plow, etc. Or if you work for someone else for a paycheck, all right, work for yourself. So now this whole situation where you have to have this effort to sustain yourself and your family. Yeah. Yeah, because exactly, because and Altam is going to explain the word shibud soon. Right, that's something that everybody has to do. It's called Noiach. How do we see that this concept of having to make a living, which it says in certain places like Adarach Nes, and nobody knows how it'll be sustained. How do we see it's similar to the flood waters? Chazal say, Hashem told Avram Avinu that he himself, his descendants, he has to choose for them what's going to be the process of purification for them to be able to experience higher levels of Kedusha. And there were two choices. There was Gehenna, which is the idea of purgatory, the idea that which obviously does exist, but the idea that every neshama would have to go through that process by default, regardless of their behavior in this world, or the idea of having to work hard in this world to make a living. So either we could live in this world like then the man falls from heaven, but then in order to go to Gan Eden, we have to go through Gehenna by definition, or we work in this world hard for a living, right? You got to work for a living. But then Lav Dafka is a person that by default have to go through all levels of Gehenna to get to Gan Eden. It depends on the person's behavior, but it's not a default. Those are the two choices Avram Avinu got. And he chose we should have to work for a living instead of getting money, rather than having by default to go to Gehenna. Just like it's impossible for the neshama, generally speaking, to come to Gan Eden, or at least Avram Avinu chose there shouldn't have to be a high level of Gehenna. But because he was given a choice between the two, we see there's a comparison. They're not identical. That's why he could choose between them, but there's a comparison. Just like a soul cannot go to Gan Eden, to bask in the rays of Hashem's presence, till before it goes down, at least temporarily. I mean, obviously temporarily, to Gehenna. Even if the person did everything appropriate according to Torah mitzvahs, that there's a process where the person has to be desensitized from his physical sensations and resensitized to godly sensations, so you should be able to experience the godliness in Gan Eden. So Gan Eden is not always a punishment; it's a process of rehabilitation or resensitization. Just like if a person has only been drinking Coca-Cola his whole life. Okay, you give him some expensive, fine, dry wine. He's not going to like it. You have to resensitize his taste buds to something which is quality. That's what Gehenna is. Just like we say regarding Acher, which was Reb Meir's Rabbi, Elisha ben Avuya, who was a big tzaddik at Talmud Chacham and then left the path of Torah mitzvahs. And the whole Gemara, how the Gemara describes how the future Chacham of future generations, they were able to impact that that he should be judged and then go to Gehenim, and that's where ultimately become the Gan Eden, the world to come. So he, because of how great he was and how low he fell, was in such a sorry state that even Gehenim was not appropriate to allow him to be rehabilitated. And it was the efforts of the Chacham of future generations who enabled his neshama to begin the process of rehabilitation by going into Gehenim. That was a step up for him. After that, he was able to go to Gan Eden and benefit from all the Torah he learned. So he did a lot of good things in his life, in the early parts of his life. That became trapped in unholy energy because of his later choices. And then, in order to be able to release that, he had to go through Gehenim. But before he go to Gehenim, he needed the Chacham of future generations to do special tikkunim for him, daven for him. The Neshama, besides going to Gehenim, has to go into a special river, and that river, to tovel in that river, to transition from Gehenim to the lower Gan Eden, and even from the lower Gan Eden to the higher Gan Eden, he has to tovel in this kind of river. So we see that the concept of Gehenim is similar to a tevilah in a mikvah. Therefore, we see that Gehenim is similar to this concept of having to work for a living, which is similar to Gehenim in that it helps a person be able to transition from and merit Gan Eden. So therefore, we see it similar to the concept of just like traveling in the Nahar Dinner, the river, the water, so to speak, helps the person rise to Gan Eden, and we see that parnasa, the obligation to earn a living, and those difficulties help a person transition from the lower Gan Eden as well to the higher Gan Eden. So too, just like this process of Gehenim and the process of Nahar Dinner helps the person rise to higher levels in Gan Eden, at the higher levels in Gan Eden. So too, the whole struggle of making a living, person is able to rise to higher and higher levels. So it's not just the difficulty a person has to go through because Hashem decided so, but it's for the purpose of bringing the neshama to higher places. Okay. The word shibud you mentioned, what does it mean, shibud? So shibud malchius or shibud parnasa often means the fact that we're in Golus, we have to pay taxes to a foreign nation. But the ultimate says that's not really what it ultimately means. That doesn't mean we have a king, in this Altar's case, the czar, right? He takes a tax from us. Therefore, everybody has an obligation to pay tax. To pay tax, you have to work for a living, right? I guess in Russia there was a head tax. So you couldn't just say, like in America, if you don't make a living, you don't pay taxes. But then apparently everyone had an obligation to pay a head tax. So if you got to make some money, so you have to pay that minimum amount to the government, and then the rest you keep, for example. That's not what shibud means. Though shagam is man mikdash, because even in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, Hayalenu Melech Yisrael, there was a Jewish king. The it was even a higher tax than it was in Russia. The Melech takes 10% of your income, as the halacha is. The Rabbi writes in Hilchos Melachim. Elakavani, when it says shibud, it means shebezman shebez mishayakayim. When there was a Beis Hamikdash, then there was a tremendous amount of blessing flowing into the world. Eretz Yisrael is, so to speak, called a land of flowing with milk and honey. What does it mean, the land was flowing with milk and honey? It means that it's very easy to get the blessings. They're flowing. So obviously you have to get up out of bed and go work for a living and plant. And the Gemara describes at the end of Maseches Ksubas the great blessing that existed in Eretz Yisrael. But there was no worry about parnasa. If you got up in the morning, you had to do something for it. It wasn't exactly like in the desert. However, results came. However, nowadays, when we're not in Eretz Yisrael, we're in Golos, every individual has all these difficulties making a living, to be involved in this world, Hagash, the physical world, right? The whole thing about making a living and how to make the best deal, how to do this, and all the things that we have to do in order to make ends meet. But this is a reference to the turbulent waters that we started the Mayim off with, saying that these turbulent waters, all this difficulty in making a living, is not going to extinguish the love the neshama has for Hashem. That are called Noiach, the waters of Noiach. Why they're called Noiach? Again, Noiach from the expression of satisfaction and rest. Why is this difficulty of getting up 6 a.m. and going to work and getting yelled at by your boss and then finally getting a paycheck at the end of the week called spirit of satisfaction and rest? Because through all these turbulent waters, the neshama, the soul, rises to a higher level than it was before it came to this world. So the love the neshama had before it came into this world with no physical difficulties, it is not as high as love it could have in this world after all these difficulties that it could rise to and use properly. Because before the neshama came to the world, it enjoyed what? The ziv hashchina, the ray of the shechina, a certain level, not the essence of Hashem himself. Like Chazal expressed, 1 hour of teshuvah and good deeds in this world is better than above all the life of the world to come. Why is that? The world to come is a much higher level. The advantage of light that's produced from darkness is higher than the light as it is by its own nature in El Haba. Subduing the evil and transforming the darkness into light, etc. That's what happens that we're able to do to being in this world involved in the difficulties of making a living. Persons involved all day in physical endeavors, with the difficulty of making a living, and which is called darkness. And we're talking about a person, mind you, who's not on the level of someone who has absolute perfect bitachon, that doesn't have a moment of difficulty or worry about making a living. He has those moments where he's downtrodden, he's worried, he's trying to make a living and it's not going well, but he's in a situation where things don't seem so easy, right? And he is, so to speak, very, very, very distracted from godliness by all these efforts and all these frustrations. Thank you. Right, but however, right, so we're not talking about tzaddik. We're talking about a person who's one of us. Maybe, right? And then afterwards, however, this guy gets a grip, right? And he takes the moment to go to shul for mincha. And he thinks about when he davens, he has a chance to reflect. While he's busy involved in his business, he's the kind of person who taka feels distracted and involved and doesn't feel godliness. But then when he davens, he has the chance to reflect that everything in this physical world has a spiritual source. In the lashon of the Chazal, the Alter quotes over here, there's no blade of grass, doesn't have a mazel, which means like a spiritual energy above. Page test, the right column, first line, right? Which is the mazal, is the constellations, the whole, for lack of a better term, forgive me, plumbing system of how the godly energy comes from Hashem into this world. Omega Tuvoi Shemesh, and the wheat comes from the sun. Omega Gerish Yirachim, that the sustenance for cucumbers comes from the moon. And these mazalas, the sun and the moon, and the constellations, which give vitality to this world, they get their energy from the malachim, the 70 malachim, they're called the 70 ministers. These ministers get from...
You talk plumbing, the leftovers.
Exactly, leftovers of the fine, which are one level of malachim, and they get from the malachim, which in these levels on levels, you have different kinds of malachim. Malachim, mefanim, interesting, all different levels over here. So... and they all get from the level of malchus of Hashem's kingship. Like it says, your kingship is the kingship of all worlds, meaning it gives vitality to all the worlds. So this whole system where godliness is devolves, if you will, from Hashem's divine energy down to this physical world, this whole process, that whole contemplation, the person thinks about the fact he got his paycheck, this whole system makes him cognizant of the godliness in the world and the source of everything that he's getting in this physical world, its original source. I heard that a bit of the Masmid, when he was in New York, he came to America to fundraise. There's videos of him. They went back to Europe and he was killed by the Nazis. when he was here, he went to Manhattan. Yitzchak Horowitz, famously known as Itch of the Masvit. The best of our physical world is the most inferior of the level above us. So just like in this physical world, you eat the most finest food, but the most pristine and best from the higher world. Excuse me. That when the higher world it finishes, sort of the process of digesting the godly energy, so the most inferior becomes the highest level of the lower level. So when he came
it's
to
the dumpster outside of the chassan hall.
Exactly. So when he came to right, so exactly. So the chassan hall dumpster is the best for the rats, right? Mm-hmm. So when he Richard the Master was in Manhattan, he saw all the wealth of Manhattan and all the tall buildings, which Europe he never saw anything like this. He's like, wow, over here the Malachim really did their business well, so to speak. That was his reaction. So Shemahav is called Elamais that the Malchus creates all the worlds. That Me'al Yesh nothing to something. I also heard that he passed a group of people playing baseball. He was watching and he said, Band of Leitzen, Halten Eitzen, und Haken Beitzen.
That's actually funny.
All right. Right? So all the best of the best of what the Malachim have is only a small ray of the Shechina. Which is only a ray of the Shechina. The Gabim Musvat Mrs. Baruch compared to Hashem himself. Okay, so again, the whole system of it. So even the highest source of what the highest Malachim are getting is only a ray of the Shechina, and even the essence of the Shechina itself, not a ray of the Shechina, but the essence of the Shechina is only a ray of Hashem's essence. So it's a reflection of a reflection of a reflection, except until finally it comes out this Olam Hazeh in a brand new Mercedes Benz. But that's the distilled of the distilled of the distilled of the exactly the pseudus of the pseudus. All right. Which is Hashem himself is infinite. Past, present, and future with no change, referring to Hashem's essence. You Hashem are before creation, you are the same after creation. Okay, so this is basically this guy thinks for a minute after this whole process of working through this whole world and finally getting a paycheck, making a living, thinking about the whole source of where it comes from. Now, after this guy has this whole contemplation, the depth of his thinking. That will arouse his soul to a tremendous, wondrous love, a fiery passion, to leave the darkness for Helam and the concealment of the physical world of this world, and to cleave to Hashem alone. So contemplate that this that I'm so searching for, and I really need because I do need to make a living. All of this is really totally insignificant compared to its source in the Mazalis, which in turn is totally insignificant compared to its source in the Sarim, which is insignificant compared to its source in the angels, compared to its source in the Shekhinah, compared to its source in Hashem. So then I really think, what really matters in this world then? Connecting to Hashem. But what brought me to realization? Being involved in the physical world. Oh, Kamashikasu, right. Right, that's exactly what they say over here. Kamashikasu, who do I desire in the heavens? And nothing, I desire nothing with you. So simply, the pshat in the pasuk is, I don't want the sun and the moon. I want Hashem. But here he's saying even the highest levels of godliness, I want nothing except Hashem. So not to desire the Lord Gan Eden. So not only is this guy coming to realization, I don't want the physical world. I want spirituality. He doesn't even want spirituality. I don't want the lower Gan Eden, I don't want the higher Gan Eden, which is only a ray of Hashem. Tzadikim sit in Gan Eden and they bask in the rays of the Shekhinah. That doesn't impress him. The name is Vashchina. He wants only Hashem himself. He called to be included, so to speak, to be absorbed in Hashem's essence. So that's what he wants. So he comes to that realization specifically from his contemplation after the effort he puts in to make a living. What the source of the hashpah, the paycheck that he gets, so to speak, where that truly comes from. Okay. The Zeres describes it as wanting to escape into the embrace of the king. This type of love, which follows from being involved in al-mazeh and coming back to your senses, if you will, for lack of a better term, and wanting to connect to Hashem only, is called tshuva. Even though a person may not have done any sins, it's still called tshuva. And tshuva is called, the love of tshuva is more intense than the love which comes from familiarity. The tzaddik's love of Hashem is familiar love, buddy love. The Baal Tshuva, our love for Hashem, is the love of when you have a fight and you make up. Which comes dafka from being in a place of darkness. He was involved only in physicalities and vanity of the world, making a living. When you see the advantage of light, is dafka from darkness. So that means on a simple level, that when you can experience Hashem's presence and comes to that realization that Hashem is the true source of everything in this physical world, that brings out the advantage of light. Whether you appreciate light, when there's darkness. But at deeper levels, you transform the darkness into light. The light comes from the darkness. That the prime ingredient of the light is the darkness. You have to learn a lesson from Hashem from everything you see, right? Some years ago, there was on Broadway, there was Spider-Man on Broadway. What was the catchphrase? Remember the advertisements? On all the buses in New York City? Turn on the dark. Remember that?
Turn on the dark.
Turn on the dark. That was the catchphrase. This is the point, right? Illuminating the darkness, not just bringing, not importing light into the dark place, transforming the darkness into light, right? Okay, so
is that by overcoming the particular problem, and just you. That's also
right.
That brings you light.
Exactly. So over here, when you use all the difficulties making a living, and instead of like letting it drag you down, keep you down, you catch yourself, and then when you're davening, you say, 1 second, all these worries I have, how to make a living. Where is that coming from? Coming from the mazalas. That comes, which is the dregs of the finest of the malachim, that's the dregs of the finest of the Shekhinah. And that's the dreg, for lack of a better word, of the finest of Hashem's essence. So that realization that comes to me, and it comes from an appreciation that despite trying to hide that, the physical world can't hide that. And in fact, that's really what it is. So now I come to a brand new appreciation. I come to a brand new level of connecting to the light. And because in this physical world, there's a source of light that even light itself doesn't have, you can only get access to through darkness. You get to the highest level of love, like we'll say now.
You say light, you mean joy.
I mean godliness.
So
yeah.
It's accompanied by joy.
Perhaps, yeah, absolutely, yeah, sure, yeah, because that's the simcha together with that. Yeah, when you realize that you can connect to Hashem. Yeah, absolutely. This love is called with all your might. You say to love Hashem b'chol vavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol maydach. Love Hashem with all your hearts, right? Your heart, all your soul, with all your might. So what does might mean? And Alter doesn't point this out, but ironically, he's saying that if you believe gvul mamish, which is infinite love. But what's the other explanation of the Chol Meidecha?
The simple taich, the pshat is it's money.
Money, exactly. Chol Meidecha means all your money. So we see the connection over between the two explanations of the same word. That through trying to love Hashem, through your money, literally meaning using all your resources, but over here, all your money, meaning through the realization of where your parnasa comes from, that brings you the love of
your very,
all your very
happens to be. If your very is your kokas and money.
So over here, but all your money means shu b'ligvul, your infinite level of love. Mamish, Shabbat Dafka, which comes as a result of the opposite, which is the darkness. Which it says in the Gemara, Hashem saw that Hashem created light. Hashem saw everything He made, and it was toiv moed. It was very good. Hashem created light, and He saw it was toiv. Then at the end of creation, it says Hashem saw everything He created. It was toiv moed. It was very good. So toiv is a malach chayim. Good is the malach of life. Ma'oid, toiv ma'oid, very good, the angel of death. What is exactly very good? Why is angel of death better than angel of life? Angel of death in this case refers to unholiness, the physicality, and its concealment of godliness, as we said. The fact I got to work for a living, and my work for living very hard. Sometimes I forget that it comes. I don't see godliness. I just see the what I got to do over here, and the worry that according to the laws of nature may not work out so well. Right? All that distraction, that concealment, that's the malach hamovus. Excuse me. Yeah. The opposite of godliness, the dark, namely the darkness. Which is my own animal soul, which is the part of me which doesn't see the obviousness that everything comes from Hashem. Right? If that was operating from that part, this whole thing wouldn't apply. There are no turbulent waters. All I see is Hashem has this thing. He wants me to go out and work for a living, but I know it's all money from heaven, and I'm not fazed by it. We're talking about somebody who's not on that level. We're talking about somebody who sees the physicality of the world and the intimidation of the effort making a living. Such a person is still able to come. In fact, perhaps not just still, but specifically such a person is able to come to the love of all your might, which is an infinite love. So now we're going to touch on what Rami said about the source of the physical world being higher than the spiritual worlds. But the Alter is saying over here something amazing, that the Shama as it was above is not able to get to this level of love. Now, I don't know if that means that the experience of the love, but what it does mean, and I think it's going to say this more clearly soon, is that obviously the level of intensity of emotion, the love that the Neshama feels in Gan Eden is higher than a physical body could ever experience. But in Gan Eden, the experience of the rays of the Shekhinah are so palpable that the love that gets this present.
Palpable.
Tangible, thank you, are so real that the love gets distracted towards them. So you love the rays of Hashem, but to love Hashem's essence, when the ray is so strong, that's very difficult. In this world, we don't have the rays of the Shekhinah. So it's easier to not get distracted and love Hashem himself. So perhaps in terms of the hierarchy on this 1 to 10 scale, love is more intense in Gan Eden than a person can experience in this world. In fact, it says elsewhere, even the greatest tzaddik in this world cannot experience the level of love in Gan Eden. But in terms of quality, in terms of the love, the commitment, if you will, for lack of a better word, that love is to Hashem's himself, not to Hashem's energy, that's more practical, more possible in this world. If that makes sense. And okay, now why is it specifically in this world that the neshama can achieve that, but in Gan Eden it can't achieve that? Because the source of the animal soul is higher than the source of the godly soul. Now we're talking about as the souls are produced as souls. Obviously, in the essence of their origin, the godly soul comes from Hashem's essence. It's a piece of Hashem. The animal soul is a part of creation, so it can't be higher than godly soul. But once you're talking about the assembly line of the Shamer factory, so to speak, at that level, the animal soul has a higher origin than the godly soul. It just later on it falls lower.
What it causes the
we'll see.
It causes the neshama later on.
Right.
That's because of her.
Right, exactly. This is now. So because it's the source of the animal soul is higher. The source of the animal soul is higher than the godly soul. But like it says, this is a pasuk in Parshas Torah, I believe. Right, the pasuk of it describes all the history of the kingdom of the monarchy among the Esav's descendants before Shaul HaMelech was king. And so, simply speaking, it's just giving you the history of Esav's descendants. It says El Tilas Esav. Here's Esav. Here's his descendants. The Torah makes very quick work out of that, and then goes talk about that Yaakov Avinu and the more important part of the Torah of the history, right? So, but the reason why Torah says that to us is like it explains in Kabbalah. I want you to Rabbi Gralik explain that even Chumashim, which try to bend over backwards not to quote sources or Kabbalah sources over here, they have no choice. Like these psukim have to be explained Kabbalistically, otherwise how they're relevant. Okay. These are the kings who ruled in Edom, in Esav's empire, before there was a king arose among the Jewish people, is a reference to the idea of the levels of that existed in the animal soul, represented by Esav, before the godly soul, represented by Yaakov. So that's the case. Why is it, in this world does the godly soul want Torah mitzvahs, but the animal soul wants non-holiness? Through the process of the shattering of the vessels, right? The famous concept that before Hashem created this world, He created a higher world, and there was designed intentionally where there was very intense energy, but not a lot of ways to contain it. Think of it as one massive like Nachman party, right? There was not a lot of like settled, and Yushav type of, thought process. It was just a lot of intense energy and not a lot of space to hold it. The limited parts of it just exactly shattered. Mata. So like it fell down to this world, and the king reigned and he died, referring to this process of these finite containers of godliness that couldn't contain infinite energy, and they plots. All right. However, in their source, they're much higher than the godless soul. What time does she usually end? 9 o'clock? Yeah. Therefore, because their source is so high, so I think maybe now we got the point. I'm just going to read in touch, and instead of expanding as much, so we can finish at least to the first part of the matter. Okay. Therefore, even as these broken pieces, so to speak, came into this world, they have the ability to dominate the godly soul. Since these the animal soul energy has a high in its source is higher than the godly soul. Therefore, even in this world, it retains the license, if you will, to dominate the godly soul, and therefore distract the person from godliness. And similarly, a person is higher than animals and fruits and vegetables, obviously, in terms of the totem pole. But the person also receives energy from these things lower than him, because they have energy which transcends the person. They come from Tayu. Without the vegetation and animals, a person can't live. But the orange, which is lower than me, doesn't need me, right? So the oranges can survive without people. People can't survive without oranges. So ironically, so therefore, even though it's lower, because it has a higher source. Because all this is because of the source as they are above. They're much higher. Higher than the godly soul. Therefore, because the source of the animal soul in its origins is higher than the nefesh l'kis, through the godly soul descending and investing itself in clothing itself in the animal soul, whose source is higher than its own source, to be involved in all the difficulties of making a living. Physical things, which are called this turbulent waters, that specifically is able. Dafka that, not only despite that, but dafka there is the godly soul able to achieve the level of b'chomedecha, this infinite love. Which is infinite, as we said before, which is much higher than the love of the neshama as it was prior to coming down to a body. At that stage, the neshama benefited from and enjoyed the rays of the Shekhinah, again, because at that level, in Gan Eden, it only experiences the energy of godliness, not Hashem himself. And then how does it do that? Not just to come into this world and being involved in physicality. You can't stop there. You have to take the physicality and elevate it. Through subduing and transforming the darkness into light, which is the uniqueness of light that comes from darkness. Because the source of the darkness is higher than nefesh l'kis canal. It just fell lower by and through subduing the darkness, you have the level where you actually you take the revival of the dead, that which is the concealment of godliness, and you remove that concealment. Not only do you reverse the process and the dead come back to life, but they actually come to a higher level than they were in Gan Eden. So the Sham which is in Gan Eden for hundreds of years comes into this world because the highest source is revealed dafka in this world. That's why even though the Rambam says that when Mashiach comes, the ultimate reward and the ultimate end of the story is spiritual souls with no body, Chassidus paskins, like those who say that ultimately the final reward is in this physical world, because that's the highest of all levels are revealed here. Okay, you want to just do a mad dash for the end for the black dot. This is why Chazal tell us that 1 hour of tshuva and good deeds in this world is better than all of the world to come. That's why these turbulent waters making a living are called the waters of Noiach. Because through these waters comes the spirit of satisfaction and rest. That causes that the ark of Noiach, which means the ark, but in this case the words, Hatfila of davening, coming to the ark. So therefore, the person comes into the teva, the words of davening, and then in davening contemplates that really all these turbulent waters making a living are just a concealment of the truth, and the real truth is everything comes from Hashem as he contemplates, and that enables him to elevate come to a higher level, and that in fact his experience of davening, experience of being in the world making a living, enhances his davening. Not only does his davening not get disturbed by it, but his davening achieves a new level because of this whole contemplation. That's why it says the waters became very intense, and the waters of the flood elevated the teva, like it says, it lifted the teva up. Pasha Pshat, of course, is that the teva floated 15 amos above the surface of the water. Which is the idea of the animal soul trying to overcome the godly soul, basic haparnasa. Yam Gash, while involved in the physical world. So why is the Mayim, the waters of the effort to make a living, try to subdue the godly soul? But ultimately, what happens is that the waters lift up the ark, the teva. That causes that there's an advantage, a new, special new light revealed. That's why the teva floated on top of the water, and it picked up the teva, the ark, meaning the words of davening. The word teva means ark. It also means words, the words of davening. This is why the big major mistake the Alter Rebbe says that people who are involved in the world making a living, they think they're not able to daven with the same intensity as the Yeshiva Bachrim. On contrary, it's the opposite. They can daven with more intensity and feeling and meaning. Because where does the tremendous advantage of light, where is it created? From the darkness. Yeshiva Bachrim, or Kollel people, aren't involved in the physical world. They don't have this advantage. So true love of Hashem and true intensity in davening and meaning in davening can be experienced by those who are involved in playing the stock market all day, right? Trying to make a living. That's what the waters of Noiach called the waters of satisfaction and rest. Shabbos, which is the idea of Shabbos, right? Shabbos is called also rest. Hashem rested from his work. In the 6 days of creation, that's the work of the 6 days of creation when Hashem's kingship energy, so to speak, is coming to this world. The first day Hashem said, let there be light. Let there be a firmament, the third day Hashem said, let there be a lawn, a grass, vegetation. In the 6 days of the week, Sunday through Friday, are called the weeks of action. However, on Shabbos, that's the resting from work, and the resting of spirit. The worlds are elevated like a person rests from his work, and all work, he stops, he gets a break, all of his energy is re-encapsulated into his soul. Right? It's not expressed anymore. So too, so too, when a person is involved in physical world, which is called the turbulent waters, through the person transforming that through the efforts of davening during the week, if you will, that's called a resting of spirit, which is the element of Shabbos. So during the week, where is there a little taste of Shabbos during the week? When you're